Dawn breaks over Willow Run. The summer of 1945 hangs heavy over southeastern Michigan, and in the pre-dawn darkness of August 15th, Willow Run sleeps like a slumbering giant. Steam rises from the Rouge River, carrying with it the metallic scent of industry and the earthier notes of marshland that refuse to be entirely conquered by concrete and steel. Somewhere in the distance, a freight train's whistle cuts through the humid air, a lonely sound that speaks of cargo and destinations and the endless movement of a nation still at war. Though everyone can feel that war winding down like a great clock, spring finally losing its tension. This is the story of a factory, but more than that, it's the story of what happens when human ambition meets impossible deadlines, when the fate of democracy hangs in the balance of production schedules, and when ordinary people discover they can build miracles if someone just gives them the blueprints and gets out of their way. Willow Run stretches across the Michigan landscape like something from a fever dream of progress. 1 mile long, nearly half a mile wide. Under its roof, you could fit 42 football fields with room left over for the parking lots. When Henry Ford's architects first sketched these dimensions, seasoned engineers shook their heads and muttered about the impossibility of it all. How do you heat a building that size? How do you move materials efficiently across distances that require their own internal transportation system? How do you coordinate the work of tens of thousands of people in a space so vast that workers on opposite ends might never see each other during their entire tenure? But here it stands, 3 years after those skeptical conversations, humming with the quiet energy of a facility that has already changed the course of human history. The locals call it the bomber plant, though that name barely captures what this place represents. It is, in the summer of 1945, the largest manufacturing facility ever constructed. It is the physical manifestation of American industrial might. It is proof that when a democracy decides to fight, it doesn't just send soldiers. It reshapes the very landscape to serve victory. In the growing light of dawn, you can see the rail lines that feed this beast. Dozens of them, spreading out like arteries from the main building, carrying raw materials from across the continent. Aluminum from Tennessee and North Carolina, steel from Pittsburgh and Gary, Indiana, rubber from Akron, glass from Toledo, engines from Ford's other plants in Detroit. Every few minutes, another freight car rolls in and another rolls out, loaded with components or finished aircraft bound for airfields from Kansas to California to the staging areas of the Pacific Theater. The numbers tell part of the story, but only part. By this August morning, Willow Run has produced over 8,000 B-24 Liberator bombers. 8,000, each one a 4-engine heavy bomber weighing 36,000 pounds empty, carrying a crew of 10 men and enough ordnance to level city blocks. Each one representing roughly 500,000 individual parts, assembled with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Each one rolling out of the factory doors at a rate that, at peak production, reached 1 bomber every 63 minutes. But the numbers don't capture the human story. They don't tell you about the farm boys from Kentucky who learned to rivet aluminum with precision that would make Swiss watchmakers proud. They don't describe the women who left their kitchens and classrooms to become welders and inspectors and team leaders, discovering capabilities they never knew they possessed. They don't explain how a collection of individuals from dozens of states and backgrounds learned to work together with the synchronized precision of a ballet company, each person's task perfectly timed to support the next person's work. As the sun climbs higher over Willow Run this August morning, the parking lots begin to fill with the cars and buses that bring the day shift. 25,000 people work here at peak capacity, though the numbers have started to decline as victory in Europe has reduced the desperate urgency of bomber production. Still, the facility operates around the clock. 3 shifts, 7 days a week, because somewhere in the Pacific, American aircrews are still flying missions against Japanese targets, and every B-24 that rolls out of these doors might be the one that makes the difference between victory and stalemate. The workers arriving for the morning shift carry with them the peculiar mixture of pride and exhaustion that defines wartime production. They have been part of something unprecedented. They have taken Henry Ford's promise that mass production techniques could be applied to aircraft manufacturing and proven it true, despite the skeptics who insisted that bombers were too complex, too individualized, too dependent on skilled craftsmanship to ever be built like automobiles. Those skeptics weren't entirely wrong, of course. The early months of Willow Run's operation had been marked by delays, quality problems, and production bottlenecks that seemed to validate every criticism. The press had dubbed it "Will It Run" in mocking reference to the gap between Ford's ambitious promises and the facility's initial struggles. Government officials had questioned whether the entire project was a costly mistake. Even some of Ford's own engineers had privately wondered if they had bitten off more than they could chew. But that was 1942. This is 1945, and the transformation has been nothing short of remarkable. What changed? How did a facility that struggled to produce one bomber per day in its early months eventually achieve a rate of one bomber per hour? The answer lies not just in mechanical improvements or process refinements, but in the gradual evolution of a workforce that learned to think systematically about complex problems. Take the riveting process, for example. A B-24 Liberator contains over 300,000 rivets. In traditional aircraft manufacturing, skilled craftsmen would install these rivets individually, checking each one for proper alignment and tension. It was precise work, but slow. At Willow Run, engineers developed new riveting guns that could install multiple rivets simultaneously. They created jigs and fixtures that ensured perfect alignment every time. They trained workers to specialize in specific riveting patterns, building muscle memory that allowed for both speed and accuracy. But the real breakthrough came when they realized that the workers themselves were the best source of process improvements. The woman operating the riveting gun 8 hours a day quickly learned to spot inefficiencies that weren't visible to the engineers who designed the process. The man responsible for moving wing sections from one station to the next developed shortcuts that saved precious minutes on every aircraft. The inspector checking fuel systems discovered patterns in common errors that could be prevented with simple changes to earlier assembly steps. Willow Run became a learning organization, not just a place where people followed instructions, but a place where people thought about how to do their jobs better, faster, more reliably. Suggestion boxes weren't just for show. They were essential tools for continuous improvement. The best ideas came from the factory floor, not the engineering offices. This morning, as the day shift settles into their routines, you can see the results of 3 years of this continuous refinement. The movement of materials flows like water, finding the most efficient path downhill. Workers move with the confident efficiency of people who have mastered their tasks without losing sight of the larger purpose. The noise of production has its own rhythm. The pneumatic hiss of riveting guns, the whir of conveyor systems, the steady thrum of machinery operating at optimal capacity. And yet, there's something different in the air this August morning. A sense of anticipation that has nothing to do with production schedules or delivery deadlines. The war in Europe ended 3 months ago. Germany surrendered unconditionally, and the massive bomber fleets that Willow Run helped create played a decisive role in that victory. Now all eyes are on the Pacific, where American forces are preparing for what everyone assumes will be the final costly assault on the Japanese home islands. The workers at Willow Run know that their bombers are part of that preparation. B-24s, modified for longer-range missions, are already operating from bases in the Mariana Islands, striking targets across Japan. The strategic bombing campaign that began over Europe has moved to the Pacific, and once again, American industrial capacity is proving decisive. The Japanese can build aircraft, but they cannot replace them at the rate American factories can produce them. They can train pilots, but they cannot match the scale of American pilot training programs. They can fortify their positions, but they cannot defend against the sheer volume of ordnance that American bombers can deliver. But this morning feels different because everyone senses that the end is coming soon. Not just the end of the war, but the end of this extraordinary chapter in American industrial history. What will happen to Willow Run when the last bomber rolls off the production line? What will happen to the 25,000 workers who have spent years perfecting the art of mass-producing miracles? What will happen to the communities that have grown up around this industrial colossus? The housing developments and schools and shops that exist solely to support the factory and its workers? These questions hang in the humid Michigan air like the steam rising from the Rouge River. They add a note of melancholy to what should be a triumphant moment. Victory is within reach, but victory means change, and change is never simple, even when it's change for the better. As the morning shift begins their work, they carry with them not just the pride of past accomplishments, but the uncertainty of an unknown future. They are part of the greatest industrial mobilization in human history, but that mobilization is winding down. They have proven that American democracy can outproduce any totalitarian system, but now they must prove that American democracy can successfully transition from war to peace. The story of Willow Run is far from over. In fact, in many ways, the most interesting chapters are yet to be written. The heart of the machine. The morning shift whistle echoes through the vast cathedral of steel and concrete, and with it, the heart of the machine begins to beat. Not the metaphorical heart of American industry, but the literal rhythmic pulse of the assembly line itself. The conveyor system stretches for miles through Willow Run's interior, a mechanical circulatory system that never stops moving, never stops demanding, never stops creating. Step inside with the workers as they flood through the factory doors. The sensory assault is immediate and overwhelming. The clang of metal against metal reverberates through the cavernous space, each impact sending vibrations through the concrete floor and up through your bones. The air itself seems thick with purpose, heavy with the smell of machine oil, hot metal, and the acrid tang of welding torches that burn like industrial stars throughout the facility. The heat hits you next. Despite the early hour, the factory floor radiates warmth from hundreds of welding stations, each one a small sun in the industrial constellation. Workers move with practiced efficiency around these points of light, their movements choreographed by months or years of repetition. The temperature differential creates its own weather system inside the building. Drafts of cooler air mixing with the heat, creating currents that carry the sounds and smells of production throughout the vast space. Follow the birth of a B-24 Liberator. It begins not with fanfare, but with the simple marriage of aluminum sheets to the skeletal framework that will become its spine. The fuselage starts as little more than a suggestion, a geometric outline that seems impossibly fragile to eventually carry 10 men and their equipment across the hostile skies of Europe and the Pacific. Watch the workers as they position each section with millimeter precision. These are not the rough approximations of earlier manufacturing. Every rivet hole has been pre-drilled to exact specifications. Every joint has been calculated by engineers who understand that the difference between success and catastrophe often comes down to fractions of inches and degrees of stress tolerance. The assembly line moves at its own relentless pace, not fast enough to create panic, but never slow enough to allow complacency. Each worker has exactly the time needed to complete their assigned task, and then the partially assembled aircraft moves on to the next station. It's a ballet of industrial efficiency, choreographed by efficiency experts who have studied every motion, timed every action, eliminated every wasted movement. But it's the people who make this mechanical symphony truly remarkable, and perhaps no one represents this transformation better than the women who have become the backbone of Willow Run's workforce. Women like Rose Will Monroe, though that's not her real name, and she's not one specific person. She is, instead, the embodiment of thousands of women who answered their country's call and discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed. Rose arrives each morning at 6:30, her hair carefully pinned beneath a regulation headscarf, her coveralls clean and pressed despite the inevitable stains they'll acquire during the shift. She carries a metal lunch pail that contains not just her sandwiches and thermos, but also a small notebook where she records observations about the riveting process. Improvements that could save seconds per aircraft, modifications that could reduce material waste. Before the war, Rose worked in a department store, selling cosmetics to other women who had time for such luxuries. Her hands, now calloused and strong from operating pneumatic tools, once handled delicate compacts and lipstick tubes. Her arms, now capable of maneuvering heavy aluminum panels into position, once arranged silk scarves and costume jewelry. The transformation wasn't immediate or easy. The first weeks at Willow Run were a series of small humiliations and minor injuries. Blisters from unfamiliar tools, bruises from misjudging the weight of materials, the constant ache in muscles unaccustomed to industrial labor. But gradually, competence emerged from determination. Skill developed from repetition. Pride grew from accomplishment. Rose operates a riveting gun that weighs nearly as much as she does. The pneumatic hiss as it drives each rivet home becomes as familiar as her own breathing. She can feel through the tool's vibration whether the rivet has seated properly, whether the metal has accepted the joint cleanly. Her ears have learned to distinguish between the sounds of proper installation and the subtle variations that indicate problems. She is part of a team of 6 women working on the forward fuselage section. They've developed their own communication system, a combination of hand signals and called warnings that allows them to coordinate their work despite the factory's constant noise. They know each other's rhythms, can anticipate each other's needs, move together with an efficiency that would impress any military drill instructor. The work is demanding, but it's also deeply satisfying in ways that selling cosmetics never was. Each completed aircraft represents something tangible, something that will make a difference in the war effort. Rose knows that bomber crews depend on the quality of her riveting for their survival. She knows that every properly installed rivet might mean the difference between a crew returning safely home or being lost over enemy territory. During her lunch break, Rose often walks to the end of the assembly line, where completed B-24s await their final inspections. The transformation from the skeletal frameworks she works on to these finished aircraft never fails to amaze her. The sleek aluminum skin gleams under the factory lights. The engines, massive radial power plants, sit ready to pull these machines through hostile skies at speeds that would have seemed impossible just a generation ago. But Rose also represents something larger than individual achievement. She and her female colleagues have shattered assumptions about women's capabilities that had persisted for generations. They've proven that physical strength, while important, is less crucial than precision, attention to detail, and the ability to maintain quality standards under pressure. They've demonstrated that the supposed fragility of women was largely a social construction rather than a biological reality. The implications extend far beyond Willow Run's factory floor. Across the country, women are operating lathes, welding ships, assembling electronics, managing supply chains. They're discovering that their minds are as capable of understanding complex technical processes as any man's. They're learning that their hands can master tools and machinery with the same skill their grandmothers brought to needlework and cooking. Yet even as they prove their capabilities, questions linger about what happens when the war ends. Will these jobs remain available to women, or will returning servicemen reclaim them? Will the skills and confidence gained in wartime translate into peacetime opportunities, or will social pressure push women back into traditional domestic roles? For now, though, such concerns remain secondary to the immediate task. The assembly line continues its relentless pace. The B-24s continue taking shape. The heart of the machine beats steadily, pumping life through the industrial arteries of American democracy. And women like Rose continue proving, shift after shift, rivet after rivet, that they are every bit as capable as anyone imagined, and perhaps more capable than anyone dared hope. A moment of respite. The whistle's sharp note cuts through the mechanical symphony at precisely 12:15, and the great machine of Willow Run exhales. The assembly line slows to a halt. Tools are set down with careful precision. Hands that have been guiding rivets and positioning aluminum sheets now stretch toward the ceiling, working out the tension that accumulates in shoulders and backs during 4 hours of concentrated labor. The transformation is immediate and profound. The factory floor, moments ago a cathedral of focused industry, becomes a thoroughfare of human movement. Workers stream toward the cafeteria in loose groups, their conversations creating a different kind of music. The music of community, of shared experience, of people reconnecting with the parts of themselves that exist beyond their role in the great production machine. The cafeteria at Willow Run is itself an engineering marvel, designed to feed thousands of workers in carefully orchestrated shifts. Long tables stretch across a space that could house a small aircraft hangar. The serving lines move with military efficiency, yet there's warmth here too. The steam rising from hot dishes, the clatter of trays and silverware, the comfortable chaos of hundreds of conversations happening simultaneously. Rose finds her usual spot at a table near the tall windows that face east toward Detroit. The August sun filters through industrial glass, casting geometric patterns across the linoleum floor. She unwraps the sandwich she packed this morning, ham and cheese on bread she baked Sunday evening, when the idea of another week at the plant seemed both routine and somehow miraculous. Around her, the demographics of American industry tell their story in faces and voices. There's Margaret, a former schoolteacher from Ohio, whose husband is somewhere in the Pacific with the Navy. She speaks with quiet authority about the precision required in electrical systems, translating her classroom management skills into quality control with remarkable success. Beside her sits James, one of the older men who stayed behind when the younger workers went to war. His arthritis makes some tasks difficult, but his 40 years of manufacturing experience makes him invaluable for training the newer workers. The conversation today, like most days lately, drifts toward the future. The war in Europe ended 3 months ago, and everyone knows the Pacific conflict cannot last much longer. The question that hovers over every lunch break, every shift change, every quiet moment is simple and complex. What happens next? They're saying Ford might convert part of the line back to automobiles, Margaret mentions, stirring sugar into her coffee with deliberate motions. Cars for all the families that have been waiting 4 years to replace their old ones. James nods thoughtfully. Makes sense from a business perspective. Pent-up demand is enormous. But the retooling? He trails off, considering the magnitude of such a transformation. Converting from bomber production to civilian vehicles would require reimagining almost every aspect of the current operation. Rose listens while chewing her sandwich, thinking about the bomber-an-hour goal that has driven so much of their recent work. The target seemed impossible when first announced, producing one complete B-24 Liberator every 60 minutes, a pace that would require perfect coordination between thousands of workers, flawless supply chain management, and quality standards that could not be compromised despite the speed. They had achieved it, though. Not consistently, not every hour of every day, but often enough to prove it was possible. Often enough to demonstrate that American industrial capacity, properly organized and motivated, could accomplish things that seemed to defy logic. The bomber-an-hour represented more than production statistics. It embodied a kind of collective confidence, a shared belief that complex problems could be solved through intelligence, cooperation, and sustained effort. "You know what I'll miss most," Rose says, surprising herself by speaking the thought aloud. "The feeling that what we're doing here matters, really matters, not just to our families or our paychecks, but to—" She gestures vaguely toward the world beyond the cafeteria windows. The others understand immediately. There's something uniquely satisfying about work that carries moral weight, about labor that serves purposes larger than profit or personal advancement. Every rivet they install, every system they test, every bomber that rolls off the line represents protection for American servicemen, support for allies fighting fascism, contribution to a cause that history will judge as fundamentally righteous. Margaret sets down her coffee cup with a soft clink. "I've been thinking about that too. Teaching was important work, and I loved it. But this—" She pauses, searching for words. "This feels like we're actually building the future. Not just talking about it or planning for it, but physically constructing it with our hands." The conversation is interrupted by laughter from a nearby table, where a group of younger women are sharing photographs from a weekend outing to Belle Isle. The images pass from hand to hand. Friends in summer dresses, posed beside the Detroit River, squinting into bright sunshine, their faces showing the particular kind of happiness that comes from temporary escape from routine. These moments of normalcy, Rose reflects, are perhaps as important as the work itself. The ability to maintain human connections, to find joy in simple pleasures, to remember that life extends beyond the factory walls. These things sustain the spirit during long stretches of demanding labor. The cafeteria's atmosphere embodies this balance between purpose and humanity. Yes, the lunch break is precisely timed, efficiently managed, designed to maintain production schedules. But within that structure, genuine community flourishes. Friendships form across lines of age, background, and experience that might never have intersected in peacetime. Knowledge flows in all directions. Experienced machinists learning new techniques from engineering school graduates, farm women teaching city girls practical skills, everyone contributing to the collective expertise that makes the impossible pace possible. As the 30-minute break draws toward its close, conversations begin winding down. Workers start gathering their belongings, disposing of trash, preparing mentally for the afternoon shift. But they move without urgency, savoring these final moments of relaxation. Rose finishes her sandwich and looks around the cafeteria one more time, trying to memorize the scene. Someday, she knows, this will all be history. The war will end, the factory will change, the particular combination of people and purpose that defines this moment will scatter to new lives and new challenges. But for now, this community exists. These connections are real. The work they return to in 5 minutes will matter just as much as it mattered this morning. The bomber and hour goal still beckons, still challenges them to exceed their own expectations. The whistle sounds again, gentler this time, calling rather than commanding. Workers rise from their tables in waves. Conversations continuing as they walk, the transition back to production beginning gradually, naturally. Rose stands with the others, her body refreshed, her spirit renewed by human connection and shared purpose. The afternoon shift awaits with its own rhythms and challenges and small victories. Blueprints and dreams. The whistle's echo fades into the vast spaces above, absorbed by steel beams and concrete walls that have witnessed miracles of precision. But before Rose and her colleagues return to their stations, before the afternoon rhythm begins anew, let us climb the metal staircase at the factory's eastern edge, where a different kind of creation unfolds. The drafting room occupies the entire second floor of Building B, a cathedral of calculation suspended above the assembly line's controlled chaos. Here, beneath banks of fluorescent lights that burn steadily through day and night shifts, 47 draftsmen bend over their tables in concentrated silence. The noise from below becomes a distant hum, filtered through concrete and steel into something almost musical. A bass note that vibrates through the floorboards and into their bones. Charles Sorensen moves between these tables like a general surveying his battlefield, though his war is waged against inefficiency and imprecision. Ford's production chief carries himself with the bearing of a man who has transformed impossibility into routine. His hands, stained permanently with ink and machine oil, gesture toward blueprints that represent months of calculation compressed into elegant lines and precise measurements. Every rivet matters, he tells the young engineer beside him, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. Every angle, fans sent on every tolerance, every sequence. We're not just building bombers, we're building the future of manufacturing itself. The blueprints spread across these tables tell stories of innovation born from necessity. When Ford first accepted the contract to build Consolidated Aircraft's B-24 Liberator, the original plans called for traditional aircraft construction methods, skilled craftsmen working individually, each bomber taking weeks to complete. Sorensen saw immediately that such methods would never meet wartime demands. The transformation required reimagining every component, every process, every assumption about how aircraft could be manufactured. The draftsmen worked 16-hour days, redesigning parts for mass production, creating jigs and fixtures that would allow semi-skilled workers to achieve precision previously reserved for master craftsmen. They broke down the complex bomber into 150,000 individual parts, then mapped the intricate dance that would bring those parts together on the moving assembly line. At table 17, senior draftsman Harold Chen adjusts his desk lamp and returns to his calculations. The blueprint before him shows the bomber's wing assembly in cross-section, every strut and cable rendered in meticulous detail. But Chen's innovation lies not in the wing itself, but in the sequence of its construction. The careful choreography that allows 12 workers to install 847 rivets in exactly 18 minutes. The mathematics of mass production reveal themselves in these quiet moments. Chen's pencil moves across the paper, calculating load distributions and stress points, but also timing sequences and worker movements. Each line he draws represents dozens of hours of experimentation on the factory floor below, testing and refining until perfection becomes routine. The secret, Sorensen often tells his team, is making the complex appear simple. His own journey to this understanding began in Ford's Highland Park plant, where he helped Henry Ford perfect the moving assembly line for automobile production. But aircraft presented challenges that automobiles never could. The demands of flight requiring precision measured in thousandths of inches. The consequences of failure measured in human lives. The B-24's fuselage, stretching 67 feet from nose to tail, had to be assembled with tolerances that would have seemed impossible just 5 years earlier. Traditional aircraft builders worked with hand tools and intuition, adjusting and fitting each piece individually. Sorensen's vision required transforming this craft into science, creating machines that could drill holes to precise specifications, jigs that could hold components in perfect alignment, and assembly sequences that eliminated guesswork entirely. The breakthrough came during the winter of 1941, when Sorensen realized that the bomber could be built in 5 major sections, each moving along its own assembly line before final integration. The nose section, cockpit, bomb bay, wing center section, and tail would be manufactured simultaneously, then joined together in a precisely timed ballet of cranes and positioning equipment. Young draftsman Patricia Wells looks up from her calculations, rubbing her eyes against the strain of detailed work. Her table holds blueprints for the bomber's electrical system, 2,847 feet of wiring that must be routed through the aircraft's frame without interfering with hydraulic lines, control cables, or structural elements. Each wire's path has been planned and replanned, tested and retested until installation becomes a matter of following clearly marked routes rather than solving complex 3-dimensional puzzles. The innovations emerging from these tables extend far beyond aircraft manufacturing. The precision tooling developed for bomber production will revolutionize peacetime industries. The quality control methods, the statistical analysis of production variables, the systematic approach to training semi-skilled workers, these advances will reshape American manufacturing for decades to come. Sorensen pauses at the large planning board that dominates the room's western wall. Colored pins and string create a complex web showing the flow of materials through the factory. Steel arriving from Pittsburgh, aluminum from Alcoa's Tennessee plants, engines from Ford's Rouge complex. The logistics of coordinating 25,000 suppliers across 48 states required creating entirely new systems of communication and control. "We're not just building bombers," he reflects, his voice barely audible above the room's gentle hum. "We're proving that American industry can accomplish anything, absolutely anything, when necessity meets ingenuity." The afternoon light slants through the drafting room's tall windows, casting long shadows across the blueprint tables. Outside, the Michigan countryside stretches toward distant horizons, but inside this room, the future takes shape one precise line at a time. Each calculation, each innovation, each problem solved represents another step toward victory. Not just in the war that's ending, but in the larger struggle to prove democracy's capacity for achievement. At his corner desk, Chief Engineer Robert McNamara reviews production statistics with the intensity of a scholar examining ancient texts. The numbers tell their own story. 8,685 bombers completed, 650,000 tons of aluminum transformed, 42,000 workers trained to precision standards that seemed impossible when the project began. But behind each statistic lies human ingenuity. The countless small innovations that made mass production possible. The bomber emerging from these blueprints represents more than military hardware. It embodies the systematic application of American industrial genius to seemingly impossible challenges. Every rivet, every wire, every precisely machined component reflects the careful thought of engineers who refuse to accept limitations. As evening approaches, the drafting room's pace slows gradually, naturally. The urgent calculations continue, but with the measured rhythm of craftsmen who have learned to balance speed with precision. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new innovations, new problems to solve, but tonight, the blueprints rest complete, ready to guide another day's production. The gentle hum from the factory floor below continues its steady rhythm, a reminder that creation never truly stops. It simply transforms, adapts, evolves. And in this quiet space above the assembly line, the future continues taking shape, one careful line at a time. The shadow of the atomic bomb, but even as those careful lines take shape on the drafting tables, something else is taking shape across the world. Something that will change everything the workers at Willow Run thought they knew about warfare, about power, about the very nature of the conflict they've been supporting with every rivet, every wing panel, every completed bomber. The news arrives in fragments, as momentous news often does. First through the crackling radio speakers in the supervisor's offices, then whispered conversations near the time clocks, then spreading like ripples across the vast factory floor. August 6th. A single airplane, a single bomb, an entire city. Hiroshima. The word itself sounds foreign on American tongues, but its meaning becomes devastatingly clear as the reports filter in throughout that long August day. One bomb, one flash, destruction beyond anything these workers have ever imagined, despite having built the very aircraft that carried conventional bombs across two theaters of war. In the cafeteria where workers had discussed uncertain futures just days before, conversations now carry a different weight entirely. The usual chatter about production quotas and overtime schedules fades into something more profound, more unsettling. Rose Will Monroe sits with her welding mask pushed back, staring at her untouched sandwich, trying to comprehend numbers that don't make sense. 80,000 dead, in an instant. How many B-24s would that take? Someone asks quietly, and the question hangs in the air like smoke. The mathematics are impossible to calculate, not because the numbers are too complex, but because they represent something entirely outside the realm of conventional warfare. Every bomber these workers have built, every mission they've supported, every ton of ordnance delivered, all of it dwarfed by a single weapon that fits inside a single aircraft. The second bomb falls 3 days later. Nagasaki, another city, another flash, another incomprehensible toll. And now the whispers carry a new undertone. Not just about the awesome power of this new weapon, but about what it means for the war itself. For the first time in 4 years, workers at Willow Run begin to use a word they'd barely dared to contemplate. Victory. Not just progress, not just hope, but actual imminent victory. Yet the emotion that settles over the factory isn't celebration. It's something more complex, more uncertain. In the drafting rooms where Charles Sorensen's engineers continue refining production processes, conversations pause mid-sentence. What does atomic warfare mean for conventional bombers? What does the end of the war mean for a factory designed entirely around wartime production? The assembly line continues its relentless rhythm, but workers find themselves looking at their tasks differently. Each rivet they drive, each component they install. How many more bombers will actually be needed? The production schedule that seemed so urgent just weeks ago now feels almost anachronistic, like a relic from an earlier age of warfare. In the administrative offices overlooking the factory floor, managers huddle over reports that try to quantify the unquantifiable. Procurement officers who've spent years calculating aluminum requirements and engine deliveries now face questions they never anticipated. Government contracts, written with wartime urgency, suddenly seem less certain. The phone calls from Washington carry different tones, less demanding, more evaluative. But it's not just the practical implications that weigh on the Willow Run community. It's the moral complexity of this new reality. These workers have spent years taking pride in their contribution to victory, in the knowledge that every bomber they completed brought the war closer to an end. Now that end has arrived through means they never imagined, through a weapon that makes their own contribution seem almost quaint by comparison. The women who transformed themselves from housewives into precision manufacturers, the farmers who became aircraft assemblers, the engineers who revolutionized mass production, all of them must now grapple with a world where warfare itself has been fundamentally transformed. The skills they've mastered, the systems they've perfected, the community they've built. What place do these have in an atomic age? Yet even as uncertainty clouds the future, something else emerges in the conversations throughout Willow Run. A quiet recognition that what they've accomplished here transcends any single weapon, any single war. The atomic bomb may have ended this conflict, but the transformation of American industrial capacity, the proof that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when united by common purpose. These achievements cannot be unmade by any weapon, however powerful. In the quiet corners of the factory, older workers share stories with younger ones. Stories about what this place was like before the war, when it was just an ambitious idea in Henry Ford's mind. They speak about the learning curve, the mistakes, the gradual mastery of processes that once seemed impossible. They remind each other that the real victory wasn't just in the bombers they built, but in discovering what they were capable of building. As August 15th approaches, as rumors of surrender grow stronger, the mood at Willow Run becomes increasingly reflective. Workers who once focused entirely on the next shift, the next quota, the next production milestone, now find themselves looking back at what they've accomplished. 18,000 bombers in less than 3 years. A production rate that military experts had declared impossible. A community that emerged from nothing and proved everything. The atomic bomb may have cast a shadow over conventional warfare, but it cannot diminish what happened here. It cannot erase the transformation of American manufacturing, the empowerment of American workers, the proof that when democracy mobilizes its full potential, no challenge is insurmountable. In the gathering dusk of this August evening, as the factory lights illuminate another shift beginning their work, Willow Run stands as something more than a production facility. It stands as a testament to human adaptability, to the power of collective effort, to the possibility of transformation that exists within every individual and every community when circumstances demand greatness. The atomic age may be dawning, but the age of American industrial might, the age of ordinary people achieving extraordinary things. That age was forged here, in this vast building beside this small Michigan stream, by workers who discovered they could build anything the world required. And that knowledge, that capability, that confidence, no weapon, however powerful, can ever take away. Tomorrow may bring news of surrender, of peace, of an uncertain future. But tonight, the work continues, carried forward by people who have already proven they can adapt to any challenge, master any process, overcome any obstacle. The shadow of the atomic bomb may change everything, but it cannot diminish what has already been accomplished here. Final flights, uncertain futures. The final bombers move through their stations with a different rhythm now, slower, more deliberate. Each rivet placement carries the weight of ceremony. Each inspection holds the reverence of last rites. The workers know, without official announcement, without formal declaration, that these silver giants rolling toward completion represent the end of an era. Margaret Chen adjusts her safety glasses one final time as she guides the nose cone assembly into position. Her hands, steady as ever, perform the familiar motions with practiced precision. But her mind wanders to the letter from her brother in the Pacific, the one that speaks of coming home, of peace talks, of a world where bombers might no longer be needed. The mathematics of production that once drove every decision, the relentless pursuit of that bomber-an-hour goal, now feels almost quaint. Charles Sorensen walks the factory floor with measured steps, his clipboard filled not with production schedules but with conversion plans. Kaiser Frazer automobiles will soon occupy these assembly stations. Civilian cars instead of military aircraft. Family transportation instead of instruments of war. 36 months, he murmurs to his assistant, pausing beside the wing assembly station. 36 months to build 18,000 bombers, and now we transition to building hope on wheels. The irony isn't lost on him. Henry Ford's original vision for this facility, mass production of affordable transportation, will finally be realized. But the path to that vision required this detour through the machinery of war, required the transformation of farmers into precision manufacturers, housewives into industrial engineers, immigrants into the backbone of American production. Rose adjusts her welding mask and strikes her torch for what she knows will be among her final welds on a B-24. The blue flame dances, steady and true, as she joins aluminum to aluminum with the skill that took months to develop. Her supervisor has already spoken with her about staying on for the automobile production. The pay will be different, the urgency less intense, but the work itself, the satisfaction of building something with her own hands, that will remain. She thinks about her daughter's questions last night. "Mama, what will you do when the war ends?" Such a simple question, yet it carries the weight of an entire generation's uncertainty. The women who entered these factories out of necessity discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed. The question isn't just what they'll do, but who they'll be allowed to remain. The cafeteria conversations have shifted in recent weeks. Where once workers discussed production targets and technical challenges, now they speak of dreams deferred and plans postponed. Frank mentions the GI Bill, how he might finally finish that engineering degree. Sarah talks about opening her own repair shop, using the mechanical skills she's developed here. The atomic bomb may have changed the strategic landscape, but it cannot erase the personal transformations that have taken place within these walls. In the administrative offices, accountants calculate the final production numbers: 18,482 B-24 Liberator bombers, each one representing roughly 63 minutes of coordinated human effort, each one carrying the hopes, the fears, the determination of workers who answered their country's call, but the numbers tell only part of the story. They cannot quantify the confidence gained by a woman who learned to read blueprints, cannot measure the pride felt by an immigrant whose precision work helped liberate Europe, cannot calculate the value of proving that American industrial capacity, when properly organized and motivated, remains unmatched in human history. The evening shift supervisor makes his final rounds, checking quality control stations that have maintained their standards even as production winds down. The last bombers to leave Willow Run will be as precisely built as the first ones that struggled down this assembly line in 1942. Professional pride demands nothing less. Outside, the parking lots that once overflowed with workers' vehicles show empty spaces now. Some workers have already moved on, returned to farms or sought opportunities in other industries. Others wait, hoping to secure positions in the automobile production that will follow. The great migration that brought them here faces a crossroads. Some will stay, some will go, but all will carry forward the knowledge that they participated in something unprecedented. The tool cribs begin their inventory, cataloging equipment that will be retooled for civilian production. Precision instruments designed for aircraft manufacturing will be adapted for automobile assembly. The physical infrastructure of victory will be repurposed for the infrastructure of prosperity. As the final B-24 nears completion, workers gather informally around the assembly line. No official ceremony has been planned, no speeches prepared, but the moment demands recognition. These men and women who transformed themselves from novices into experts, who accepted impossible deadlines and made them routine, who proved that American democracy could outproduce any totalitarian system, they deserve this moment of quiet acknowledgement. The bombers' engines, still silent, wait for their first test firing. The fuel tanks, empty now, will soon carry the aviation gasoline that will power this aircraft across an ocean. The bomb bay, designed for destruction, remains clean and purposeful. But this particular B-24 may never see combat. Peace negotiations proceed, surrender seems imminent, and the instruments of war may become symbols of victory rather than tools of continued conflict. Margaret steps back from her station, her final inspection complete. The nose cone sits perfectly aligned, ready for the next phase of assembly. She removes her work gloves slowly, savoring the weight of them, the calluses they've helped create, the competence they represent. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, different opportunities, uncertain directions. But tonight, in this moment of completion, she understands that she has been part of something that transcended individual ambition or personal gain. She helped build the arsenal of democracy. She proved that ordinary people, given proper training and clear purpose, can accomplish extraordinary things. The lights begin to dim across sections of the factory floor, areas where work has been completed, where the great machines rest in preparation for their transformation. But the quiet isn't empty. It's full of accomplishment, full of memory, full of the knowledge that when the world needed them most, they answered. Echoes of industry. The great machines slow their rhythm, one by one, like a heartbeat gradually finding rest. The pneumatic hiss of air tools fades to whispers, then silence. Conveyor belts that carried the dreams of a nation through endless shifts. Finally still. Workers gather their lunch pails, their worn gloves, their small personal tools. They move through the vast spaces with a different cadence now, no longer driven by the urgent tempo of wartime production. Their footsteps echo differently in the cavernous halls, softer, more reflective. Some pause at their workstations, running calloused hands along familiar surfaces, saying goodbye to places where they discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed. The parking lot slowly empties. Cars and trucks that arrived in darkness now depart in the amber light of evening, carrying people forever changed by what they accomplished here. The lot that once held thousands of vehicles, testament to the workforce that built miracles, grows quiet. Gravel settles, dust motes dance in the slanted sunlight. Inside, the factory floor stretches into shadow. Overhead lights click off in sequence, section by section, creating pools of twilight where once sparks flew and metal sang. The assembly line, that marvel of coordination and precision, rests empty. But if you listen carefully, you can almost hear the echoes. The steady rhythm of riveting guns, the whir of drill presses, the careful instructions passed from experienced hands to eager apprentices. The drafting tables in Sorensen's engineering section hold blueprints that will soon be filed away. Detailed plans for aircraft that help turn the tide of history. Pencil marks and calculations, coffee stains and erasure smudges. Evidence of the intellectual labor that transformed impossibility into routine production. These drawings will gather dust, but the knowledge they represent, the innovation they captured, that lives on in the minds that created them. In the cafeteria, empty tables remember the conversations that shaped lives, discussions about post-war dreams, about children's futures, about the pride of work that mattered. The bulletin board still holds notices about carpools and shift changes, reminders of a community that formed around shared purpose. Soon, these too will be taken down, but the bonds forged here, those endure. The administrative offices grow quiet, typewriters covered, filing cabinets locked, production charts showing the impossible made routine. Numbers that tell the story of American industrial might, of ordinary people achieving extraordinary things when given proper training and clear purpose. Statistics that represent not just bombers built, but lives transformed. Confidence discovered, barriers broken. Outside, the Michigan evening settles over Willow Run. The massive building, longer than the Empire State Building is tall, sits in gathering dusk like a sleeping giant. Its windows reflect the last light of day, holding within their glass the memory of round-the-clock shifts, of dedication that never wavered, of a workforce that answered when history called. The silence isn't empty. It's profound. It holds the weight of accomplishment, the satisfaction of duty fulfilled, the quiet pride of people who know they helped save the world. These walls remember the sound of democracy being built, one rivet, one weld, one precisely fitted component at a time. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new purposes, new opportunities to serve. But tonight, Willow Run rests in well-earned peace, its mission complete, its legacy secure, its people forever changed by what they discovered they could achieve when they worked together towards something greater than themselves. Hank, the legacy of Willow Run. And in the months that followed, as summer turned to autumn and autumn to winter, the transformation of Willow Run became a quiet testament to the enduring power of human adaptation. The great assembly lines that once carried the skeletal frames of B-24 Liberators now bore the emerging forms of civilian automobiles, their chrome bumpers and curved fenders catching the same industrial lighting that had once illuminated bomb bay doors and wing assemblies. The rhythm remained. The precision endured, but the purpose had evolved with the grace of a river finding its new course to the sea. Charles Sorensen walked these floors in those transitional days, his practiced eye noting how the same principles of mass production that had revolutionized aircraft manufacturing were now reshaping the automobile industry for a peacetime world hungry for mobility and progress. The conveyor systems moved with familiar efficiency. The quality control stations maintained their exacting standards. And the workers, many of them the same faces who had built bombers at the impossible rate of 1 per hour, now applied their hard-won expertise to creating the vehicles that would carry American families into their prosperous future. Rose Will Monroe and her fellow workers discovered that the skills they had developed during those intense wartime years translated seamlessly into this new industrial landscape. The precision riveting that had sealed fuel tanks now secured door panels. The careful alignment that had ensured proper wing attachment now guaranteed smooth operating windows and perfectly fitted hoods. Their hands remembered the work. Their eyes retained the ability to spot imperfection, and their hearts carried forward the pride of craftsmanship that had been forged in the crucible of national necessity. The great factory floor that had once echoed with the urgency of wartime production now hummed with a different energy. the steady confidence of a mature industrial process serving a nation at peace. Where once the morning shifts had arrived, carrying newspapers filled with battle reports from distant theaters, now they brought stories of suburban development, of new highways being planned, of families reunited and communities rebuilding. The same hands that had built instruments of war were now creating the tools of peacetime prosperity. In the engineering offices, where blueprints of bomber specifications had once covered every available surface, new designs took shape, sleeker automobiles with improved engines and innovative features that would define American automotive excellence for generations to come. The intellectual rigor that had solved the complex puzzle of mass-producing military aircraft now tackled the equally challenging task of creating civilian vehicles that were both affordable and reliable, accessible to the growing middle class that was itself a product of the industrial transformation Willow Run represented. The cafeteria conversations had changed as well, no longer dominated by discussions of production quotas measured against the urgent needs of overseas combat operations, but filled instead with talk of new model years, of design innovations, of the expanding network of dealers who would carry these vehicles to every corner of the nation. Yet beneath these peacetime concerns ran the same current of purpose, the understanding that their work continued to serve something larger than individual ambition, the building of American prosperity and the strengthening of communities through reliable transportation and economic opportunity. As the seasons turned and the immediate post-war adjustments settled into routine, Willow Run became more than just a factory. It evolved into a symbol of American adaptability and resilience. The building itself remained largely unchanged, the same vast spaces under the same high ceilings, but its meaning had deepened and expanded. Where once it had represented the nation's ability to mobilize for war, now it demonstrated America's capacity to transform that mobilization into peacetime progress without losing the efficiency and innovation that had made victory possible. The workers who remained, and many did remain, found themselves part of a continuing story rather than simply veterans of a completed chapter. Their expertise had not become obsolete with the end of hostilities. Instead, it had proven to be the foundation for a new kind of industrial excellence. The young women who had discovered their capabilities on the bomber assembly lines now mentored new employees, passing on not just technical skills, but the deeper understanding of what it meant to work with precision and purpose. The great parking lots that had once filled each morning with the vehicles of workers arriving to build instruments of war now welcomed the cars of employees, creating the transportation that would define American mobility for decades to come. The same Michigan weather that had tested the endurance of wartime shifts now witnessed the steady rhythm of peacetime production. Snow giving way to spring rain, summer heat yielding to autumn coolness, the factory adapting to each season while maintaining its essential function as a place where American ingenuity transformed raw materials into finished excellence. In the executive offices where Henry Ford and his lieutenants had once wrestled with the seemingly impossible challenge of producing bombers at unprecedented speed, new leaders now planned for a different kind of unprecedented achievement, the creation of an automobile industry that would make personal transportation available to virtually every American family. The same strategic thinking that had solved wartime logistics now addressed peacetime distribution. The same commitment to innovation that had revolutionized aircraft production now drove advances in automotive engineering and manufacturing efficiency. The supply chains that had once carried aluminum sheets and aircraft engines to Willow Run now delivered steel and automotive components. But the underlying principles remained constant: the precise coordination of materials and timing, the quality control that ensured every component met exacting standards, the continuous improvement that sought better ways to achieve superior results. The war had ended, but the pursuit of excellence continued, transformed but undiminished, and as the years passed, as the immediate memory of wartime urgency softened into historical perspective, Willow Run's true legacy became clear. It had proven that American industrial capacity was limited only by American imagination and determination. It had demonstrated that ordinary people, given proper training and meaningful purpose, could achieve extraordinary results. It had shown that the same society capable of unprecedented military production could channel that capacity just as effectively toward peacetime prosperity. The great factory continued to operate, its lights burning through night shifts and weekend overtime, its workers arriving each morning with the same fundamental commitment to quality and efficiency that had characterized the bomber production years, but now serving the peaceful purpose of providing reliable transportation to families building their lives in an America made stronger by what they had all accomplished together during those crucial years when democracy itself hung in the balance. In the end, Willow Run became more than a factory, more than a symbol, more than a memory of what Americans could achieve when united by common purpose. It became a living testament to the truth that the same qualities that enable a free people to defend their liberty, the ingenuity and determination and collaborative spirit, are precisely the qualities that enable them to build lasting prosperity and to create opportunities for future generations to achieve even greater things than they themselves had dared to imagine possible. And so the great factory rests tonight, its machinery quiet but ready, its legacy secure in the knowledge that it helped prove America's capacity not just to win a war, but to transform that victory into the foundation for decades of peace and progress, its walls holding forever the memory of what free people can accomplish when they work together, when they believe in themselves, when they understand that their individual efforts, however small they might seem, are part of something infinitely larger and more enduring than any single moment or challenge or triumph, something as lasting as the democracy they served, as hopeful as the future they helped to build, as peaceful as the sleep that comes to those who know they have given their best to purposes worthy of their highest aspirations and deepest commitments to the common good.